Salve and welcome back. This is the first in a mini-series in our ongoing series on Rome, this one on the Roman Republic. Early Rome emerges around 700 BCE, and it's surprising that it becomes a dominant and important factor in world history. During its early years, the legendary period of Romulus and Remus, and the Omens and the Wolf, and the arrival of Aeneas in the Aeneid, despite of its legendary beginnings, historically it is only one of a number of different towns in the middle region of Italy. It happens to be right here, but there's nothing in the early going to indicate it would become important. One crucial advantage it does have long term is the weakening of the Etruscans to the north, up here. They are the dominant culture in the region. As they get weaker, this allows the emergence to power of Rome. Incidentally, the term Etruscan is where we get the modern term for northern Italy, Tuscany. The other thing, in addition to the weakening of the power to the north, is the Roman military and culture. It has a great military historically, driven in part by their location. They are in the middle of the Italian peninsula. They have no natural boundaries, and therefore, to defend themselves, they must depend on, and develop a strong army. Culturally, they strongly value the importance of honor before death, and they refuse to admit defeat. Minor infractions in the military were met with a punishment of death, and specifically the ancient Roman custom and punishment in the army of decimation. We now use this word to mean being strongly defeated or wiped out or annihilated, but its ancient Roman roots are from the root of 10. What it meant was any Roman legion that lost in battle, or that fled, or that retreated, or that brought embarrassment on itself would be decimated, quite literally lined up, and every 10th man was killed. This had, as you would imagine, a very strong effect on encouraging one to not retreat and to hold fast and to charge forward, because if not, you might randomly be killed, as 10% of the legion was. Combined with this strong emphasis on honor in the military was the extension of Latin rights to incorporate the conquered people. While they were incredibly ruthless in war and battle, once they conquered you, they learned to incorporate these people into their culture, to make them full Roman citizens, to extend to them full Latin rights. Once you were conquered, you had the privilege of voting and becoming a full citizen with equal rights, and the honor of helping to serve in the army. So as they conquered more people and incorporated them into the army, this grew the size of the army, and this allowed them to conquer more and more land and more people. During this period, it is a time of war and expansion. The first major series of wars and expansions are known as the Punic Wars, from the Roman word for purple, because the wars are against Carthage across the Mediterranean in the modern North African country of Tunisia. Carthage was started and founded as a colony by the Phoenicians, or the Purple people, and it is from the word purple in Latin that we get the Punic Wars. The first of these is fought from 264 to 241, and this is also the first example of Rome expanding outside of Italy. As the army grows in size and scope and stature, they begin to expand their power and influence as well. They have a great army, but they're very bad at sea, and they keep losing ship after ship, but they don't care. They keep building more and more ships. They capture and tear apart a Carthaginian ship to learn how to build the ships, so that they can ultimately build their own modeled on the ships of Carthage and defeat them, which they do in 241. The second of the Punic Wars is notable for Hannibal, a Carthaginian general actually born and raised in Spain, a province or colony of Carthage. He, according to legend, swears an oath as a young boy at the end of the First Punic War to avenge the defeat and to bring Rome to its knees. He takes 20,000 men and some war elephants from Spain through the Alps down into the Italian peninsula, where he wins victory after victory. He is a great general. He chooses the proper battlefield. He uses great techniques. He usually has a smaller army than the ones of Rome, and yet he wins. But Rome refuses to admit defeat and surrender. They lose 60 to 80,000 men time after time, but they will not admit defeat. Ultimately, they raise another army, travel across the Mediterranean, and attack Carthage itself. Hannibal is recalled to Africa, where outside the gates of Carthage, he meets the invading Roman army and is ultimately defeated. The third and last of the Punic Wars takes place about 50 years later, from 150 to 146 BCE. It results in the razing, which means the tearing and burning to the ground of Carthage. According to legend, they hated the Carthaginians so much that in spite of them no longer being a threat, the Romans provoke a war, burn Carthage to the ground, capture all of the women and children, sell them into slavery, and plow salt into the earth so that nothing can grow there ever again. In that same year, 146 BCE, Rome also conquers the Greek town of Corinth, and they begin their expansion not just into Africa, but conquering Greece as well in the east, as they continue to grow and expand outward. You can see here the expansion of Rome from the Italian peninsula outward into the area of Greece, across into Carthage here. The Carthaginian colony in Spain, again incorporated into Rome, so that by 146, Rome now controls Spain, North Africa, Italy, as well as Greece. With expansion comes issues, or in the phrase of the great philosopher, the notorious B.I.G., mo money, mo problems. What happens is, as they grow and expand across the entire region, it becomes increasingly hard to govern this incredibly vast territory. The smaller model of the Roman Republic is no longer able to pass laws and maintain control. An example of this is a period of civil wars during the 150 to 80 BCE time period. Men rise up in Rome and try and give land to the returning soldiers and veterans. They offer food and bread and land to these men, and the Roman elite or rich classes tend to have them assassinated for provoking class conflict. Here are two key terms we add at the bottom. Latifundia. These are large Roman slave plantations. As people get more and more land, rich people own more and more of the land, and they farm the land with slaves. This is, of course, bad for slaves themselves, who have to work in the fields and grow the crops, but it is also bad for the poor and for the soldiers who are coming home and cannot afford to buy land of their own because it is being bought up and worked by slaves. This leads to increasing class conflict, where some wealthy people try and speak up on behalf of the poor. Other wealthy people see it as not their problem and have no interest in giving land or food or help to the poor. An example of this ongoing class conflict is shown here at the top, and that is, of course, Julius Caesar. Technically, his full name is Gaius Julius. He lives from 100 to 44 BCE. He has campaigns as a general in Gaul, that is the current country of France. It is a brutal war to sort of take the local tribes and people and basically bring them under the control of Rome. He also sends an expedition to Great Britain. He also engages in propaganda. He sends letter after letter back home to Rome to be read in the town square to publicize his great campaign and his great victory. It ends with about 1 million local people dead in Gaul and 1 million enslaved to be sent to work on the latifundia. The Roman government that is having trouble controlling the increasing size and scope is known as the Republic. Its emblem or motto is SPQR, or Senatus Populus Quae Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people. It worked well on a small scale. It allowed some sort of voting and a representative democracy very similar to our own, but governing the vast new territories was much more difficult. The key idea here in concept from which the term republic comes is res publica, or the public thing. The basic rule and structure is shown here on the right. You do not need to know every step and detail of this. The basic gist of it is the most important body is the Roman Senate, which issued the rules and laws. It is provided over by 2 councils who are chosen or usually elected from the Roman Senate to serve a 1-year term. Each could veto the actions of the other to keep the power in check. Veto literally means I forbid. They, in turn, the councils and the Roman Senate, were checked by the tribune of the plebs, or the plebeians. The tribune spoke up and could veto laws that were seen as being detrimental or harmful to the plebeians. So, key terms: council, tribune, Roman Senate, and patricians, the rich upper classes, and the plebeians, the poor lower classes. Here is a map of the expansion of Rome, including the growing territories increasingly being controlled by governors. Here is the ancient Roman social class or hierarchy of the patricians, who make up the bulk, if not the entirety, of the Roman Senate, and the plebeians, or the commoners, including the people who are incorporated but not born in Rome, other incorporated foreigners, the freed people, and the slaves. The Republic did have a system of control. In times of trouble, there could be a temporary man whose word or dicta was law, a dictator. He would be chosen for a brief period of time, usually 1 or 2 years, to make any laws, to make any changes that needed to happen. Over time, this system begins to break down. There are increasing tensions between the rich patricians and the poor plebeians, and efforts towards land reform on behalf of the plebeians increasingly lead to the leaders being assassinated, specifically 2 brothers known as the Gracchi, from their last name Gracchus. A relative or nephew of the Gracchi was actually Julius Caesar, who tries again to reform the system. He is recalled to Rome, and the rule is you cannot bring your army back into the home territory because the army is loyal to the general, not to the Republic. But in the north of Italy, he crosses the Rubicon River, and this is seen as a point of no return. Once you bring your army across the Rubicon, you have broken the law. He comes in and establishes his rule. He uses the army to back it, and he is first proclaimed dictator to make the laws and the changes necessary, but then he's made dictator for life. Rome has a long custom and tradition of fear of kingship. They don't like kings, they're scared of them, and this leads to the assassination of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March, that is March 15th in 44 BCE, because he's seen as taking on the role of kingship, as claiming too much power and authority for himself. Unsurprisingly, this does not solve the problems, and the ongoing conflict and civil war continues. The closest general of Julius Caesar is known to us now by his more English name, Mark Antony, not the famous singer, who allies with the nephew and adopted son Octavian. Octavian lives from 63 BCE until 14 CE. They ally to crush the murderers of Caesar and then go to war against each other for who will control. This ends finally in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium, a naval battle off the coast of Greece, with Octavian victorious. Mark Antony and his lover Cleopatra flee the battle and commit suicide.